United. Today we've got a show, and the question is sacking managers the new norm in football? And we've got a brilliant panel today of Rich, Tereak, Matt and Brush. Rich, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Thanks for the invite to this, actually. I know, obviously, for me personally, I don't think our manager's under any stress, but if we don't
Must be nice.
If we don't get any players in, I tell you what, he could walk in the summer. It's a bit of a sticky situation at Palace.
And a manager is definitely not under pressure. We've got Tereak. How are you doing, Tereak?
I'm all good. I've got plenty to smile about. So yeah, for sure, man. And it's great to be in this position, like with my manager, because there's been so much talk around him ever since he stepped through the door, and my club is known for ins and outs, which camp are you based in? But yeah, it's a great position right now where there's no questions around my manager.
And our manager, where we're both very happy. Brooke, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate. Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. And now we've got on the bottom left who doesn't have a manager. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm great. Once you can all hear me, I'm fine. That'd be great, yeah. But yeah, it's just the last 2 weeks have just been an absolute circus at Everton Football Club, and it'd be interesting to see what you guys have to say about it, because I know I have a lot to say about it. But it'd be interesting to see fans of other clubs and people like Tereak, whose manager is in a decent position, but also bear in mind, like this time 2 years ago, Arteta was under severe pressure at Arsenal, and he was going game by game as well. Like, so it'll be interesting to see, I suppose, that the topic of conversation that we're going to have tonight. Do you give a manager time like Arteta got at Arsenal, and will he eventually be able to reap the rewards, or do you just do what Everton do and wait till Christmas time and sack a manager with a week to go on the transfer window, 3 years on the bounce? So it's going to be an interesting conversation, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And before we get going, there's some people in the chat I'm going to say hey to there. Good evening, Reese. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Good evening, Karsten. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Good evening to Ravi. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Good evening, Niall. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. There was a comment a bit further down which I'm going to put on as well. Good evening, Chris. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. And good evening, Vibes. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. I will start off with this one. Matt, I heard you put someone in a headlock near Goodison Park.
No, it wasn't me, and I don't think it actually happened either. But that's another thing we're going to probably get stuck into this time, I suppose.
Well, let's go on to the topic then. There has been a lot of managers who's been sacked, especially more recently than others. Already this season, there's been sackings of Scott Parker, Thomas Tuchel, Bruno Lage, Steven Gerrard, Hasenhüttl, and now Frank Lampard. And on top of that, there was managers last season, probably near enough every single club had the manager sacked or leave. So there must be some kind of trend going on. And I'll go with you, Rich, first of all. Do you feel like this is the option going forward? Why has it been more of an occurrence?
It's a good question. You know what? I feel like the Premier League's become more of a business. And success is like deemed by what you do on the pitch, obviously. Obviously the financial implications as well. And a lot of teams have become a lot more impatient with their managers. Now, granted, some of them are warranted, Lampard's, and so was Gerrard's as well. And others are like, maybe like a Hasenhüttl who could have maybe seen the season out and such. Tuchel, but that's Chelsea's model anyway. So it's so difficult to tell, because you look at Arsenal now, and I mean, to be fair, Arteta could have been gone last season as well, to be fair to him, but they stuck with him, and look at what he's achieving now. So I generally think each manager should have at least 2 years. You know, the first year is all kind of seeing how it is, getting your own players in and such, and then have the follow-up year and then take it from there. But owners are being ruthless these days, so hey.
What's your thoughts on that, Tereak? Because, of course, with Arsenal, you're seeing a lot of pressure, especially from the fans, that they weren't happy with Arteta. They had a bit of a rough spell, but you stuck by him and now you're top of the league.
Yeah, unfortunately, Rich is kind of right when he's talking about the business element, because it is definitely to do with the finances when it comes to managers and the risk that it really has. Like within Everton's situation, I'm sure Matt will elaborate on it a bit more, but if there's that threat of relegation, clubs and owners and people within the board always feel like they have to make that decision to try and cut them out, even if they originally have a plan, but they have to feel like they deviate. And that's also in the case for a lot of teams that are in and around the Champions League positions as well, when, you know, a club like Manchester United and Arsenal, where we thrive off of the revenue that we get in Europe. So to take the hit is I don't think owners are willing to take that risk. But I also think the biggest factor is, though, clubs don't really have a plan. And a lot of these occasions, and when they hire a manager, Tottenham, for example, there isn't a plan when they hire Conte. It's just let's try and succeed with this manager for the short term, and and it will sort itself out in the long term. If you focus on the now, the future will sort itself out. Whereas I don't think teams are future proofing and they're not really building a project. I think it's actually 3 years that you'll need, given the transfer windows and how hard it can be to shift players with their contracts. If you've got issues like when Arteta first came in at the club, these were issues that weren't just focused on the pitch. There was so much things that need to get deep rooted and culture changes. And I think there needs to be a 3-year plan for each team, and sometimes you have to take 1 step backwards to go 2 steps forwards.
What's your thoughts on it as well, Brush? We're gonna say Matt till last, because we know what is coming with Matt.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think sackings are part and parcel of the modern game, and I do think it comes down to finances. I think a lot of clubs feel that it's easier to replace management than it is to replace half the personnel, so they just want to try something different. Obviously, it's nuanced in every situation. Like Rich touched on, there are some situations in which it's in haste, and they can work on that. I know we're going to get into the Everton thing. I'm probably going to go against the grain and say it's not all down to Lampard. It's the structure at that club, similar to ours. It comes from the top down, and until that mess is sorted out, it doesn't matter who takes on the job. They're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's numerous of different factors what goes into it, and we will touch on the managers who got sacked and departed last season, just because with this season it's a bit more of open right now. There's still probably going to be quite a few managers yet to be sacked already this season, so we'll have to see on what goes on. But what's your thoughts, Matt? Because I know it's not very nice at Everton Football Club right now as well.
Well, I suppose just trying to, I won't go too much into the Everton situation at the moment. It's just trying to keep what the lads are saying, but kind of keep it with Everton as well at the same time. Everton are currently going to be going on to their 10th manager since David Moyes left the club for Manchester United. And since pretty much, I think we're going on to our 10th manager as well since the Moshiri money came into the club. And the problem with that is that you also have players like Seamus Coleman, who's on his 10th manager at the club. You have players like Michael Keane and Jordan Pickford. They're on their 5th, 6th, 7th manager at the club as well. And I think it also comes back to implementing a culture at a club. And I mean, this time 18 months ago, Carlo Ancelotti was managing Everton Football Club. So you had that culture there, winning mentality, Champions League winning managers, trying to push for Europe. And then you have a half decent group of players with Richarlison, James Rodriguez, all kind of involved, like Lucas Digne at the back creating chances. And then he obviously goes on to bigger and better things at Real Madrid. And then you go completely against the grain, completely against the fan base, and bring in Rafa Benitez, who instills a completely opposite culture as to what Ancelotti had. He alienates the dressing room. He basically pushes Lucas Digne out the door. pushes James Rodriguez, who was arguably our best player that we've had since Mashiri's came in with the money. He made him move out as well, alienated him as well, and then he didn't last. And then you bring in Frank Lampard as well with 2 days to go before a transfer window closes. He then has very little time to implement his style and culture. And he's bringing in loan players like Dele Alli and Donny van de Beek that we touched on the last time, Maisy, I was talking to you. And I feel managers aren't getting enough time to implement their own style and culture because, like you say, it's a business. They're not going to get time to do it. Now, in terms of Tereak's club, Arsenal, Arteta, I suppose you could say he was given a little bit more time than what most managers would do, because he went in there with a plan, he went in there with a structure, and he said, if you give me time, I promise you we'll move forward together. He went in and he went up against the egos in Ozil and Aubameyang and said, no, if you're not going to do the way I want to do it, then you can leave. And yeah, it took a little bit of time, but look where they are now. Most points in the Premier League season, and you could arguably say that he's brought himself into that category of the decent managers in the Premier League, up there with the likes of Conte and I wouldn't say Guardiola and Klopp just yet, but he is up there on that pedestal now with decent managers because he's been allowed to implement his style and his culture. And I think Tereak will probably be able to talk a lot more about it. And I just know a bit of him because he used to play for Everton as well. But I think if you give managers time, and Rich, I suppose, like Vieira's been at the club now. Is this his third season at the club, Rich?
Second
season at the club. But can you see, Rich, any kind of can you see him implementing a culture and a style in at Palace, or do you think it's just kind of leveling out now?
No, the style's been there. It's there from last season. But the problem we had is that we didn't invest in players over the summer, and we're kind of paying for the price now. Like even now, like Antoine Semenyo looks like he's on his way to Bournemouth, and we've been looking at him for months. We just have to match a £9 million bid, and we haven't done it. So we're struggling board level as well, and kind of keeping Vieira's hands tied behind his back, and I guess I mean, I know I was saying how obviously managers they have a rough go at it and stuff, but like as Brush mentioned, like the board obviously doesn't help, and obviously if the structure's not right, that doesn't help either. I guess the thing with Lampard though, he lacks accountability, in my personal opinion. Even at Chelsea, it was always someone else's fault. Like you could never question his decision making and stuff. He came to when he was of your gaffer, when we beat you in the FA Cup, everything was fluke and average, and it's like, no, we adjusted and you didn't adjust back. Sometimes it can be the tactical side to it. So, and it doesn't help when he comes out and says, "Oh, I'm bigger than this sort of club and that sort of club." Mate, you managed Derby, and then you were gifted Chelsea, So it's like there's an arrogance with Lampard, which I don't think has probably. I'm not saying he has lost the dressing room. I don't know. Like, obviously, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes in your club, but that sort of arrogance and lack of accountability it's nothing ever going to go well when managing a club.
Yeah, like I think over the last, I think you're right in terms of 50-50. I think with Lampard, I think you're right in terms of he was a little bit arrogant, as in like he came into Everton when he first started and he said, I'm going to play free-flowing passing football. And then he really quickly realised that he doesn't have the players to do that. And I think, again, this season, he said, I'm going to start now. This is my time to put my own imprint on this club. And again, he should have realised he doesn't have the players to do that. I mean, against West Ham in the game, which inevitably he lost his job, he only made 2 substitutes, 2-0 down. Like, if you're fighting to save your job, make substitutes, change tactics, do something. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of like he was like, well, it is what it is now. And I think Anthony Gordon hasn't been playing. He was kind of left out of a match day squad there recently and hasn't turned up to train the last couple of days. So yeah, he probably was alienated by that. And then Abdoulaye Doucouré as well was sitting down on football in the 10-minute warm-up before the match. He wasn't warming up properly, and He was told to go train on his own and stuff like that as well. So I think once that sort of stuff starts happening in the dressing room, I think a dead man walking type of scenario as well. But on the flip side of that, Everton could have been in a very, very privileged position if they had pulled the trigger on Lampard before the World Cup. They had so much opportunity there. I mean, Wolves brought in Lopetegui, and we're yet to see where that's going to go. But he seems to be pulling strings there, bringing in decent players, and again trying to implement what he's going to do. And we already know that he's a very, very good, decent manager. So I think they're going to bring themselves out of trouble. But they moved early, and they decided, no, now's the time to do it. We have a 6-week break here. Then we're going to go into a transfer window, and we're going to give ourselves a chance. Everton, again, exactly like they did last year, Rafa Benitez, they just waited too long. And if they had pulled the trigger after the Bournemouth game, we would have had Wolves, Southampton, West Ham at home. One of them would go to one of those games away with a new manager, new ideas, possibly new players as well. And we just lost 9 points, 6 points at home because we just didn't actually act fast. And a perfect thing as well with the board there the other day, the whole Danjuma incident. Act fast, get the players signed, but now they're Phil Larson around trying to get things signed and probably sending a contract over to Mashiri over in New York, and then all of a sudden Spurs come in and they say, here's the money, sign for us. And he goes. It's just everything at board level with Everton is just so slow. And until they move out, I think we're not going to change. And it's going to be very, very interesting now, I think, at the moment, because we're going from Frank Lampard now, and the word on the street apparently is the 3 managerial candidates. It was only 2 today, but apparently a third one's come out of the water, which is quite interesting to me, is that we have Bielsa, who was the ex-Leeds manager, who was polar opposite to what Frank Lampard was. So then again, you have another managerial change halfway through a season where the players are like, what are we doing here? Then you have Sean Dyche, who I think is probably best suited for that group of players at the moment. And then apparently today, news is broken that Carlo Ancelotti's son, Davide Ancelotti, apparently is interested in taking the job. Now, that would be quite interesting, and it would be interesting to see what he could do. But is he ready to go in and coach an Everton team who are struggling? Although he's been there already and he knows the players.
Especially in this current situation you find yourselves in, Matt, I think Dyche would probably be the most sensible. With Bielsa, I don't think you have the players. Apart from Onana, everyone else is going to get run into the ground. Dyche has got experience of this exact situation. Like immediately when Lampard got sacked, I was thinking, oh, where do you guys go now? Back to Big Sam? So, I think Dyche would probably be the right man. But yeah, like you touched on, bro, until that structure's sorted, nothing's going to change. And in the modern game, with some of these managers, they need to stop being so naive. It's all good and well Lampard wanting to play a certain style of football, but you need to understand the pressure for results, in this league. And you need to be adaptable. That's the key thing. Because we found that with Ralph Rangnick last year when he came in and he started doing his 4-2-2 thing for a couple of games, and it wasn't working. We've seen it at Chelsea as well. Potter's trying to do it now where he wants to play a certain way, but the players don't fit what he wants to do. So there comes a point where you might have to put some of your principles aside until such a time where you get your personnel in and you can implement your style. And until then, you just have to play to your strengths.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I know Niall has asked in the chat about the thoughts on Bielsa. And the thing is, I actually don't mind Bielsa as a manager. Could he do well at Everton? Could he get the best out of some players? And I think possibly. But however, we've seen stunts of Bielsa where it comes to year 3, he doesn't do so well. There's a downward spiral there for Bielsa. And I feel like for me, for Everton in particular, you need to start building some kind of identity. I don't know, it does stem from the very top. And to get someone who hasn't got the best of track record long term, is that good? Is that good enough for Everton in general?
Well, I think I think you're right. Like, I don't know if any of you seen it. I put it into the group chat the other day. It was the Everton fan advisory board had a chat with the owner, Farhad Mashiri. It was to me, it was quite comical. Like, I think the interview was recorded before the West Ham game, so it was before Frank Lampard was sacked and everything. And it was just, he then goes out and then says that the sacking of Lampard is not his decision, but then he goes and sacks Frank Lampard himself, and now he's making decisions on who the next manager is. But you have a director of football there who's supposed to be in charge of directing the football club in the right way. And like Kevin Tellwell might say, yeah, like I think Sean Dyche is the best option for this football club. But then you have the owner who's signing off at everything, saying, no, I don't want Sean Dyche, I want Bielsa. So if you have a director of football in there and you're not listening to him, what's the point in them being there? There's no point in them being there. So everyone has to be on the same. At the moment, Everton are pulling each other apart, and they just need to find somebody and basically just stick with. If they bring Dyche in, just have to let Dyche do the business, try and keep us up, and then just let him work. But see, the problem with it is that Everton are stuck between a rock and a hard place now, because we've gone through so many managers now that we are scraping the bottom of the barrel, where our two main candidates are managers that have been out of a job for 2 years, and Carlo Ancelotti's son. They're the only people who want the job. Even Ralph Hasenhuttl will turn this down. So the problem with it is that if you keep sacking managers, you become a poison chalice and no one wants to go near you. And I don't blame Danjuma for doing what he did going to Spurs. It's probably a clever thing to do. And anybody who comes into the Everton job at the moment probably needs to go get their head examined as well, because the only way you're going to get success there at Everton Football Club is if you win 8 out of the last 18 games and manage to keep the club in the Premier League. And your next 2 games are Arsenal and Liverpool. So best of luck with that.
But this is it. This is you mentioned this point when you was talking there. When I look at Everton, when's the best period that you had? And that's under Carlo Ancelotti, when the whole club seemed committed towards him and committed to try and build him. That's the issue that these football clubs have. And that's why these managers don't want to take these jobs, even if they can be quite lucrative. They don't want to take them because they feel like they're not going to get that backing that they need. And I feel like this is the case for a lot of clubs. Liverpool's owners were heavily criticised until Jurgen Klopp came in. And then because it was a figure, it was someone who's come from Borussia Dortmund, who's had success elsewhere, they trusted him and they felt like they could do that. And I don't think football, it's not like management and trusting your managers is, there's someone in the hierarchy that has to be on the same page as the manager. I think the best way to look at it is how Arsenal, Manchester United have been run in our most successful periods. When Arsenal had David Dean at the helm, and when Manchester United had David Gill, and then how David Dean used to work with Wenger. He's the one who picked Wenger out, and Gill and Sir Alex Ferguson had a very good relationship. And you can hear about it when players at the time, like when Jesse Lingard came out speaking on Stephen Bartlett's on his podcast, talking about Sir Alex Ferguson and David Gill, how they were really able to, how they connected to everybody within the club, and you have that commitment and everyone on the same page and board, even with the Glazers in charge, even with Arsenal in charge, even with, the Kroenkes in charge of Arsenal right now, who have been a failure for ever since they've come into the club. But because they've been able to give the reins to Edu and Mikel, and Edu was the one who backed Mikel, and he's the one who found him and, was emphasizing we need to get this guy in at the point. And even when Mikel didn't have that reputation and that trust to begin with, but I think the FA Cup victory helped build that a lot with the hierarchy. But I do think it is that simple. If you commit to a manager in his signings, and not just a manager, but the technical director or someone suitable who actually understands what they're doing at the club, you don't even need the best of owners.
And it's so important that they're both on the same page, isn't it, Tim?
Yeah, that's it. That's what we've seen in terms of our success.
Yeah.
And in Richie's case as well, what you will say as well, Rich, is, your most successful period, right? That came when, you last season, when Patrick Vieira was backed with the players that were brought in, and you were and the players that were brought in his image. And even then, you still had Joel Ward. You still, Tyreek Mitchell is very high potential, but isn't quite a Vieira system type fullback in terms of how he wants to play. But because they're all heading in that same direction, and when there's been that creeping a bit of doubt in terms of he's not being backed, things start to look a bit shaky and wobbly. And look at Man United. I think they're the best example. They've probably got the worst owners in the country, but they're from Manchester United fans, I'm sure you still talk about them. You still want the mountains and whatnot. But success, if you do get success, that will quickly, cover some of the cracks and some of their flaws as well. In terms of
There's still a lot of issues, T, but finally we're in a position where, from the manager down at least, things are clicking into place. So it's just the structure above it that needs fixing. And like you touched on, the amount of criticism that Arteta has had over the years, and the key thing is that bond between him and Edu, and them being on the same page and trusting in each other even when others didn't. You mentioned Klopp as well. Klopp had his best years working in tandem with Edwards. And then we've got the example now of Chelsea, where Potter and Bowley are totally on different pages. And, it's just going left.
Well, I don't think Graham Potter could handle all them players, because I genuinely don't know how we'd be able to find a best 11 out of them players he's got. But Brendan said something very interesting in the chat, and he feels like time is not the factor. I think Brendan is thinking more about instant results, and I just want to get someone's thought in that, because we've all spoke about similar things, but Brendan said something completely different, which I'll touch on with Rich.
A manager needs time. A manager needs time to implement his ideas and stuff. I said about 2 years. T said 3 and stuff. Obviously, if things are going totally bad, I'll give an example. Frank de Boer, when he took over with us, what he had done, he had alienated the backroom staff, and he had alienated some of the senior players, forced them to train with the under 23s and stuff at the time. Yeah, then they're not afforded time. Also, circumstances are going to dictate to it. If a team's battling for relegation, would the manager be given time? Because obviously the main aim is to stay up. So you kind of have to look into those factors as well. But then I look at the fact that, even like I said, I mentioned Hassan Hutel. Now, he did take a few 9-0 batterings, but he put Southampton playing a very decent brand of football. They got rid of him, and the person they've brought him in his place ain't looking too great anyway. It's almost as if they've resigned themselves to life in the Championship. So sometimes it's better the devil you know. But yeah, I think it's important to give managers time. I think the whole managerial merry-go-round started between Chelsea and Watford. It was like, how many managers can we get rid of in the space of a calendar year? And yeah, it's almost as if a few bad results and that's it for you. I mean, it'd be interesting to hear from T if he had always kind of backed Arteta, or whether he was even thinking, actually, a change is warranted. Because obviously his kind of drought period was a lot longer, But like you did mention, that there was a plan in place as well. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because managers, as I agree with you 100%, they need time, but also you need to have some sort of instant success at the same time, and something for the fans really to trust and to give to, because they're the ones who make the decisions at the end of the day. They're the customers. We spoke about it being treated like a business. They're the ones who pay the bills. They're the ones who come to games and voice their opinions. And Arteta was able to do that because he got that FA Cup. That's why I stood with him, and that's why I was like, you know what, I see the potential in what he's working with. And from a face value, as someone who's not knowing the inner workings of the club and how they've got a plan in set out, and because they're not going to obviously make that public, so other clubs can go out there and steal it and try and mold it in that way. But that's what I saw, and this is where you saw it, Rich, with Patrick Vieira, and this is what I would say to Frank Lampard, for him to keep Everton up, right? That was a big statement for me, because that Everton side, they looked down and out. I remember about this point last year, we was talking about Everton, no chance. When Frank Lampard first came in, tried to implement his style, Arteta did the exact same thing, tried to implement his style and got on the end of a few hammerings. I remember losing to Brighton. I remember losing to Manchester City 3-0 with David Luiz trying to play a certain way. And then we had to transition to a 5 at the back system, which, of course, when you're looking now, that's nothing that Arteta wants to do, that pragmatic sit back football. And I think that once Everton fans, I remember speaking to Matt and Matt sharing a wonderful story in terms of, how Everton how it impacted him and his family even, and staying up, and how emotional that was. And this is the emotional game for fans, so we're always going to be quite up and down with those things. And to touch on, with Arteta, I was very firmly in the camp of, give him time, because the club seem like they are backing him. And if the club are serious about backing him, they know something that I don't know, even through the rocky periods where it was easy to say, like, Arteta out and those things. But yeah, man. And I think that's the biggest key is about having an actual structured plan and knowing what you're doing, and being extensive in your research on not just recruiting players, but how you get a manager into your club as well. Not just looking at what they've done and what they've achieved elsewhere, because there's different environments and different scenarios in each club. So yeah, as long as clubs do that, I think they can get success, which is the opposite in terms of what European football and what modern day football will tell you. If you try and build your club and have a philosophy in at the top, and then managers can come like on a conveyor on a belt and it will always stay the same, I don't think that works. I think it's a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, I agree, and we'll quickly look at as well the managers who got sacked last season as well. Before we do that, we'll quickly say hi to some new people who's got into the chat as well. Hey there, UFTV, I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Hey there, Luca, I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Hey there, Nippon, I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Hey there as well to John Hand, I hope you're well. Thanks for coming in. Hey there to Virginia, I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Hey there, Kay Slater, I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Hey there, I Like Coffee, I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Hey there as well to Static, I hope you're well. Thanks for coming in. And hey there to Primot, I hope you're well. Thanks for coming in. Primot has said, following the footsteps of major North American sports, owners want instant results. Sacking managers because they're a dime of dozen. It's a tough job. Do you think, I'm going to go on to Rush about this, do you feel like Todd Boehly has looked at, for instance, the NFL and probably the reasons of why he wanted to sack Tuchel?
Listen, the man wanted to rename them the London Cowboys. I'll leave it there on that, mate. Yeah, listen, I'm not against any sort of owner coming in as such, but yeah, the small example we've seen of the American ones coming in, they believe in that franchise model, don't they? So some of them are a bit clueless in how everything works over here. So you got to get up to speed quick. Yeah, initially I thought regarding the contract lengths that these new players were getting, maybe that's to do with the fact that he's come over from the NFL, because obviously that's not uncommon over there. But obviously in light of recent news, we've come to find out it's just their way of getting around FFP with breaking down the payments basically over a longer period. I think they're trying to cramp down on that as well. I think they're trying to limit it to 5 years maximum contract lengths. Yeah, to avoid this kind of thing. So yeah, looking for loopholes on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, doing 8-year contracts, sneaky top baller, that's for sure. We'll go on to some of the managers who got sacked. I'm not going to waste my breath with Watford because they're sacking FC anyway. But a good one who I think we should mention who's in there is Nuno Santo. He actually only came in the season and he got sacked. And the weird thing is as well with Nuno is that he actually won manager of the month before he actually got sacked. So that is very, very strange. And you look at that and think, what was the reason for his sacking? And
Patrick Vieira.
Patrick Vieira.
Oh yeah, that was the first one.
As Rich had to say, Super Patrick Vieira. That's the only time I'm ever going to say it. Sorry, Tereak.
What did you say again? I couldn't hear you.
Again. No. We're not doing a mat trick. But one thing what people... I've actually spoke to Ravi about behind the scenes is player power. Could that have been a big factor in the Nuno second? And I'll go to Matt about that one because we've seen the Harry Kane refusing to go to training because he wanted to leave the club. And now he wants to extend his contract.
Yeah, but I think the Kane situation. I think any manager could have been in at the time, and I think he was kind of at the point in his career where he maybe was trying to turn his head a little bit. But obviously, the results probably and the way the training went probably didn't help either. But I know Kane's probably at a point in his career now where he's saying, "Will I go to Bayern Munich and win trophies, or will I, or he stick around and get the top goal scorer in the Premier League?" Because I think he'll get that if he sticks around at Spurs eventually. But player power, I suppose, is a big thing. But like manager power as well, I think is gone as well. Like Lampard probably felt at Everton that he couldn't speak to the board because he would have been sacked, and I think like boards that are so trigger happy as well, like managers can only do so much, and managers can only really train the players that are there at the club at that time. And I wanted to touch on something as well, like in the way the clubs are being run at the moment. I mean, Brighton lost their manager Potter, and they replaced him within 3 days with De Zerbi over in where was he at? He was at Shakhtar, was he?
Sassuolo at that time.
Sassuolo, yeah, at the time. Like they replaced him straight away. Like the player power. I think there obviously is massive player power. Players can get their manager sacked. They can if they want to. It's happening every year at Everton. Like players are down on the tills when they don't fancy the manager anymore. They did it under Rafa Benitez. A few players probably done it under Lampard as well. And in terms of at Spurs, like if Conte starts throwing his toys out with a pram, do you think the players are going to do that as well at Spurs? I don't know. Like, did you see? I suppose Tereak as well. You might be able to elaborate on it at the start when Arteta came in. Did a lot of the players that he got rid of? Do you think they were down in tools trying to get rid of him?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And Ozil was one of them. He was the first one that really he stamped his mark upon, got him out of the squad. And we was at that time we was desperate for a creative player as well, because we wasn't really creating many chances. And if you remember watching Arsenal, we used to play with that umbrella shape that we used to play in that formation. And Ozil was at the club, and he was the first one. There was other players, Kolasinac. There was rumours coming out about Kolasinac and the likes of Mustafi, because there was a Man United, Maisy and Rush, you'll both know about this. There was moles at the club where a lot of news and information and team news was getting leaked out way before kickoff times, and even the day before of kickoffs, we'd know what the team is and stuff, because there was rats and moles in the club. And that's what Arteta was working on getting out and getting rid of, and players did down tools in that sense. Yeah, Matt, and up until Aubameyang, and then even when we got rid of Aubameyang, and that was our team was worse at that point because we lacked a goal scorer, our performances went up and sky high. So yeah, player power, it still seems to be the big thing.
Can I add fan power to this as well? Because all of a sudden, I feel like fans have demanded a better style of football from their club. You know, before you would say Stoke play this way as such, Burnley play that way. And look at when Burnley went down. They demanded that Sean Dyche start playing football, which worked for a period of time. And then it's like, but this ain't us. We don't know what to do in this situation, you know. And if you look at every club, I don't think there's a long ball side anymore. Like every team's either pressing, possession or counter, you know, and the fans demand that the football is good. So I think that's probably why, which didn't help Nuno at the time, didn't help Lampard. The football wasn't good, you know.
Again, with the Nuno thing, though, I think also because they did try and fail to get Conte in the summer. So Santo was always second choice. So,
it's a brilliant.
It was actually 49th choice.
Yeah, that's a brilliant.
So from the get go, you know, he's already under the cosh. Yeah.
To be fair, we rejected him as well. So we dodged him.
And then the other thing you touched on, Rich, with regards to Stoke. Stoke is a very good example of sometimes you need to live within your means. Like as bad as people say the football was under Tony Pulis, they were regularly in the Premier League.
It was sustainable, yeah.
It was sustainable. It was a sustainable model. And then obviously Mark Hughes came in for a little while. It worked. It was great with Arnautovic and who else did they have? Shaqiri, Bojan, the front three. Yeah, they look good. But, you know, when that fails and you get relegated and you spend all that money and it's all gone, we've not seen them again.
Do you know what? I'm actually going to disagree with you there, because with Stoke, their issue was they didn't have a plan whilst Tony Pulis was there and how they were going to progress. They just thought, let's get rid of him, and if we sign these types of players, they should be able to carry us through. I think Aston Villa made that mistake with Dean Smith and then Steven Gerrard following that, because the best way to look at it is a club like Brighton. Brighton, coming into the Premier League, Chris Hughton is their manager. He's done a fantastic job, and he kept them up in that season. They still got rid of him. I remember the same thing happened with, who was the manager now? Nigel Adkins at Southampton. He's just brought us back into this predicament. But because those Southampton and Brighton had a plan, and in terms of recruitment, and
that's the key thing. Proper planning and structure.
Exactly. But they were able to develop and evolve their football and take it to that next level.
Yeah. So with Stoke, they started to deviate away from what they knew. And then the spending started to get a bit ridiculous as well. I remember Gianni and Bula going there for like 20 million.
They did it with players. They did it with players, though, not with actual scouting.
Who was that Real Madrid guy that get? Was it Hesse?
Hesse Rodriguez.
Yeah.
It's like, how are they signing players from like Barcelona and Real Madrid?
Yeah. And if you do your background research on that guy, it was never going to work. Let's just say he lives a colourful life outside of football.
Oh yes.
I liked what Rich touched on as well about fan power, and you look at this second of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, which I'm gonna go with Brush. He was on a downward spiral. We knew that. But the thing is that he was an awful lot of pressure by not just the players who was giving up, but there was a lot of pressure for a year and a half just off the fans. Because even if you got a win, Ollie out, lose, Ollie out, before the game, Ollie out. That's all we could ever see trending on social media.
Yeah, it was very polarizing, wasn't it? I think those of us who grew up with him had a certain affiliation to him, Ollie the player, and that brought him a little bit more time. Managerially, I don't think he should have been in the job in the first place. So it was one of those.
Do you know what? I agree with you, right? And I agree with Andrew in here about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as a manager, tactically wise, coaching wise, the worst manager.
Dreadful, wasn't he?
But exactly, he was horrible. But the thing is, right, and this is where it comes to backing managers, right? He's probably, out of recent, until Ten Hag's come in, of course, was the most successful in terms of how the football was and how the feeling was at points around the club when they was playing well, that PSG game, and he was close to winning the Europa League and stuff. I know he didn't, so like Jose Mourinho and Van Gaal take that, but in terms of the feeling around the club, it felt much better under Ole, and that just shows you how powerful he can be backing a manager, because he was the most backed manager in terms of signings that were brought in, and the time where it started to fall apart was when players who were brought in that didn't suit what Ole was trying to build. I'm not saying that you should have, because that's horrible football to watch, but it brought the most results on the pitch in that sense. So it just shows you how powerful that is. You can have a terrible manager and still have some element of progression.
And just as Brendan said in the chat, that also the club will let the players walk all over, and as well as the manager, which did not help whatsoever. And I like coffee. I just want to bring that in there. Michael Carrick's still unbeaten as a manager at Man United. Only a few games. Beat Arsenal, so that's one positive at least. But I've seen this. I don't know how true it is, but Matt, there was I read a report that Ollie is also linked to Everton.
Oh, good God.
Jesus Christ. Just put me out of my misery now, please. No, I don't think it's true. I think journalists are just basically throwing every manager under the fun and at the same time poking a stick at what is already somebody that's lying on the ground hoping to be put out of their misery, I think. But I think the only real two candidates at the moment that Everton can really go for is Dyche and Bielsa. Bear in mind, you don't actually have to appoint a manager in this transfer window. You can appoint a manager whenever you want. But it's just trying to attract players, like the players that we're trying to bring in over the next 3 or 4 days. They need to know who's going to be the manager. if they're going to commit their future to a club. Like Danjuma probably was signing for the club and Lampard was in charge. And then the board go and do what the board do, sack Lampard and then bring in, and then Danjuma just goes, actually, well, I'm not going to go there then. I'd rather go sit on the bench at Spurs, which is his own prerogative, but he's probably a clever thing to do as well. But I think I wanted to touch as well on you're saying fan power and player power. I think manager power is coming back slightly into it a little bit. I think in terms of Ten Hag with the Ronaldo situation, Arteta with the players that Tereak touched on as well there, like Aubameyang was massive. He literally just signed a massive contract, made captain of the club, and Arteta will says, well, good luck, you're not part of my team. And I think if a manager can go in and show that he's number one in the dressing room, I think that's where the players' respect will come. Because if a manager cowers down to somebody like Ronaldo, if Arteta had went into that dressing room and cowered down to Kolasinac and Mustafi, other players wouldn't respect him, and that's where you can lose the dressing room very quickly. Whereas if you walk into a club as an inexperienced manager, like Arteta was at the time, and tells their club captain, you can piss off if you want, you're not part of my plans, then nobody's bulletproof then. Do you know what I mean? Nobody can feel invincible, which is, I think, fair play to Ten Hag for doing what he did with Ronaldo. So what if you're a club legend? You're not pulling your weight, get out. And simple as that. And I think that's great. And hopefully other managers and teams and boards can start following suit and start backing that manager, because at the end of the day, we can't continue sacking managers. And that goes for across the whole board. Like Watford, like a sacking manager left, right and centre. Everton have become that club now in the Premier League where we're sacking managers every 12 to 18 months. You have to give managers time to implement. Like Frank Lampard was dealing with 7 different managers' players. He probably didn't want half of them there. Like, so in order, and like if he had hung on to Lampard till the end of the season, by somehow if we stayed up, 7 or 8 players were out of contract, and Lampard could have been given the chance to start moulding his squad. And yeah, he got lucky last season. I wasn't celebrating staying up against Crystal Palace second last game of the season. We were lucky, and that shouldn't be celebrated. And again, we continued on our bad form. Like we didn't have great form towards the end of last season. We continued on our bad form into this season. And I think any manager that goes in there is going to have a really, really hard task. And I think if Bielsa goes in there, you have somebody who doesn't speak any English, and he's going to have to try and communicate with a board who doesn't communicate with anybody. So that's going to be a recipe for disaster. But I think all things considered, and all things considered in terms of the actual board, the actual players that are there, I think you're going to have to just give Sean Dyche an 18-month contract and say your priority this season is just to keep us in the Premier League. Aim for 18 draws, and if we pick up 5 or 6 wins on the way, we'll stay in the league. That's just the way he's going to have to do it, because I think if Bielsa goes in and tries to run the players into the ground, I just don't think it's going to work, unfortunately.
And before we go off this, there was one how can I say, I like Coffee's case, more of a positive sacking of Steve Bruce, because we look at them. They the manager who's been sacked. Nuno's not had a good and a job since. Ollie's not been in a job since. I think he's coaching on the 15 team in Norway. Dean Smith, he's in the Championship.
Just
so
been sacked by Norwich.
Oh yeah, he did get sacked from Norwich, yeah. But Steve Bruce being sacked. Well, they say mutual consent, but we know it was a sacking. But Steve Bruce leaving and then bringing in Eddie Howe, he has turned that team from, as people called, average players with a tiny bit of tweaks into a top 3 club. I'll go with you on that, Rich.
The second of Steve Bruce saved Newcastle from relegation. That simple. Eddie Howe came in and did an incredible job, which is obviously continued into this season. And it really goes down to coaching. And I think that's such an underrated attribute that a manager has. Yes, you need a bit of luck. Yes, you need a bit of financial backing. But your primary aim is to make the players that you have better. And that's what Eddie Howe did. Joe Linton turned into some world-beating centre mid, and such. Dan Burn became incredible, like he's making very basic players look good. And like, look at them this season with the additions that they had with Trippier. I know Bruno came in last January. Like, I think they've gone 19 games with like, I don't know what it is, but their clean sheet record's stupid. I can't remember the last time they lost either. Someone's gonna have to remind me. It's a crazy record they run, and it's just down to the coaching first and foremost. Because yes, they've got their new ownership and stuff, but who have they actually brought in that you say, oh my gosh, that's definitely like Saudi money? Like they haven't gone for like an Mbappe or a Neymar or a player of that caliber.
I think they're doing it in stages, though, aren't they, Rich? They're going about it the right way.
No, absolutely, and that's what I'm saying. They haven't hit that heights where they've gone for the big names.
Yeah, I'm sure the ownership and the takeover definitely gave them a huge boost but from where they were when Eddie Howe took over. You have to give massive credit to the job he's done.
Oh, unbelievable job. So yeah, Steve Bruce's sacking was, let's just say, it came too late. In hindsight.
I was going to say something before I have to jump off, but like in touching on Newcastle, like that was the way that a new ownership comes in and sorts their club's issues out there and then front and centre. You come in, you get rid of the whole board, you get rid of all the backroom staff, you bring in a new young up-and-coming manager, you back him to the hilt, you let him implement his own style, and look what happens. They've gone from relegation certainty to top 4 challengers this year in the space of 12 months. And you know what? Fair play to them. Listen, guys, I have to go. All right, talk to you later on.
By the way, can anyone hear Matt?
I've just been ranting for the last few minutes there, have I? Yeah.
Joking ahead.
Go on, guys. Go on, talk to you later, guys. Bye.
So that we've touched on a couple of the managers, not all of them. Otherwise, we'll probably be here all night. There's about 10 managers who left. Surprised Chelsea didn't sack any managers last season, but ayo.
It's coming. I'm telling you, it's coming. This Todd Bowley guy is tapped. He's not right in the head.
It shouldn't happen, but it probably will. That's the worst part about it.
He's gonna sack him.
And it's crazy because a manager like Potter, he needs time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Speaking of Chelsea OGs in the chat. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. Hey there, Anfield Uncle Rods. I hope you're well. Thank you for coming in. And hey there, Indian Scouser. I hope you're well. Thanks for coming in. There's a couple of questions, and I can't touch on all of them, but I'll touch on a few of them. So we'll go with this question from Rather. Do you guys think owners are ruthless enough on managers when it's time for them to go, but you still see them cough, boys, Rodgers?
This might sound controversial. I do feel that British managers are afforded a bit more time than foreign managers.
What about Allegri? He's a borrowed time for time. He's still like borrowed time.
I'll tell you what, Maisy, before they got humbled by Napoli the other week, they went on a run of 8 games, one on the trot with 8 clean sheets.
And then they was in the top 3, and now they've got their 50 points.
Yeah, then they had a 3-3 draw, I think, and then they've been deducted 15 points.
And I think Todd Bowley has went in to buy them 15 points off Juventus.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Here's a good question from Niall touching on Chelsea was it the right thing for Chelsea at the time to sack Thomas Tuchel when they did and replace him with Graham Potter? Which is quite an interesting one. A lot of the Chelsea fans weren't happy, and Thomas Tuchel won numerous of trophies. He's been in cup finals, and on top of that, he had a 60% win rate. So you look at that is a crazy sacking. Don't you agree, Tereak?
You know what? I actually do. I actually agree with the sacking of Thomas Tuchel, and it's similar to the one where Steve Bruce was sacked. If you've got a new ownership, they have to get their man. Obviously, the problems with Chelsea coming afterwards, and I thought that they would have. Do you know what? I'm going to be a little bit nice to Chelsea, although I shouldn't be, after what they've done to us in recent weeks and stuff. But I do think they are heading towards a plan now. And if you do have new ownership, I think that you can sack a manager, because obviously Tuchel wasn't there, man. It was Roman Abramovich that brought him in. And we know if results would have went the same anyway, he would have still got sacked. But benefit of the doubt with Chelsea is they did sign a lot of horrible players that didn't work, and mishmash in the summer, and difference between ages, and wasn't a clear strategy. However, the signings that they've made in this window do have a plan in terms of their ages and what type of player that they're bringing into the club, like Badiashile, Mudryk, who are youngsters who are coming into the top clubs and top performers in and around Europe. So if they do carry on that in that way, then they can have success in the future. But they've got to give Graham Potter time if you're going to be willing to do that. Otherwise, as Rich was saying, player power will always win if you do that.
But just on what you were saying there, T, like, look at your mindset regarding Arteta. Arteta came in, won an FA Cup, and you said that was enough to give him time. Tuchel came in, won a Champions League, and he still lost his job. It's just crazy how different ownerships work.
It's the culture at Chelsea as well, isn't it? So, yeah, I was definitely a little bit surprised. I thought, if anything, they would have given him at least till the World Cup, and then they probably would have looked at the situation, see who's available. Maybe someone like a Luis Enrique. With the profile of club Chelsea are, that's the kind of manager you'd think they would go for. And then when you did take a chance on a Potter, you have to back him. He's a project manager. He's not going to come in. He's not got the CV of a European heavyweight. So you need to be on the same page as him, understand what it is that he wants to implement, and then work with him. Whereas this guy is just playing football manager and FIFA career mode in real life, just picking up anyone and everyone who's like rated highly.
I'll tell you what is a culture at Chelsea. They'll probably win the Champions League now, because Chelsea, whenever they're shocking in the league.
I'll tell you what, as discombobulated as all of this is, when you just look at the actual arrivals that are coming in, they're good players. They're good players, and the age profile as well. So eventually, I don't know if Potter's going to be the one to get it right, but whoever does in the future, like they're going to have a good team.
Do you know what was more weird, though, about the Thomas Tuchel sacking is that you look at the summer transfer window, the players that Chelsea brought in were ones that suited Thomas Tuchel. Aubameyang, for instance. And people saying Nakula Bali, which I'm not going to talk too much about because I am not his fan. He was a Thomas Tuchel signing, and Raheem Sterling as another option. And I look at that and think, why back the manager in the transfer window when it was rumoured that he was going to get the sack regardless?
That's true. Yeah, I can't explain that, because I remember with Aubameyang coming in, that all the talk was, oh, look how he did under Tuchel at Dortmund, and then what was it, 6 days later after he was brought in, he got sacked. Yeah, Todd Bailey on that one.
Good question from Reese here, which I'll go to brush with. What do you think an owner's tolerance level before they pull the trigger on a manager? Too many get sacked for losing 4 games in a row or over something petty. To be fair though, Daniel Farke, he won a game and he got sacked.
Yeah, and that's a strange one as well, because Daniel Farke for a club like Norwich, like, where do you really go from there? Because I thought overall he did a good job.
What do you think is the tolerance level for you, Brush?
It depends on the club really and what their ambitions are, I guess. So it kind of differs from club to club. It's a strange one. Obviously 4 games on the trot just defeats. It's a concern, but still it depends. Are the players still behind the manager? Can you see like certain things in games that he's trying to implement, or is it like a Frank de Boer type situation where there's just no hope? I think it depends on that.
And I think this is a good question from Ravi as well, which I'll go to Rich with. Do you sack a manager halfway through the season or give them till the end of the season?
It depends, because you know what? I can see why some managers get sacked before the transfer window. Because if they bring a new manager in, at least he's got a window to get a few of his own players in.
And that new manager bounce really helps sometimes.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a tough one there. It really depends on the circumstance, you know. If it is their first season, no, but then you don't. This is why it's all business, because getting relegated has drastic ramifications,
drastic consequences. Anyone on Premier League wages needs to go. You need to completely
really
restructure everything, which is why clubs like Norwich actually work within a certain budget. Like when they, which is why they're happy as well to bounce up and down and yo-yo, because that squad is perfectly suited to the Championship.
And I
it's
think
better than the Championship, in my opinion.
Yeah, but then I think the problem they find is that they're too good for Championship but not good enough for Premier League.
I think you can split this question to, like, say the top half of the teams and the bottom half of the teams. See, for the bottom halves, they've got to survive at all costs. Whereas the top half teams, listen, they're not fearing relegation.
That's true, Rich. I reckon if you're a bit higher up, you could probably afford to give your manager more time, right?
More time, to try and get European football and stuff. But if you're in the relegation battle, you got to do all you can to survive.
With that one, I'll just say quickly, I think if you're thinking of sacking a manager, or if you're thinking I'll give him to the end of the season, sack him halfway through. Get rid of him halfway, because if you've already got that seed of doubt in you thinking him, you're not going to back him the way that you should. And Bruce, as Bruce was mentioning about the new manager bounce, it's better to do that and generate a different atmosphere around the club. If it's that scenario there, what was the point in Arsenal giving Emery until the end of the season when the players checked out the club and there was literally no communication between Emery and the board at that point? So yeah.
That's fair enough. And I think some people argue in regards to Man United about Ole. He should have stayed till the end of the season, because what was the point in bringing Ralph in?
But then you was able to get Erik ten Hag in, though, don't you think? Like, that was a big
I mean, at the time, with the Ralph thing, the only thing I was excited about was potentially the job he could do at the end of it.
Which never happened.
If he were to go upstairs. And even then, we were just left fiddling our thumbs, weren't we? Like, we didn't really know what was happening. It was all just hopes and dreams and that.
But even with the Ralph and for me personally, just from the outside looking, the biggest mistake he made was change his formation. Because if you've got a philosophy, you've got to stick with it.
But Rich, that 4-2-2 weren't working, bro. Like,
that was a horrible formation.
No, I get it, but I mean, if that's what you believe in, you've got to stick with it. Because
but this is where the points thing comes into play, right? Like, in a pressure situation, do you stick with your philosophy if you're here for 6 months, or do you just play your best players in their best position?
I feel you get the respect of the players more than if you just say, "Oh, actually, I'm going to
listen." That man wasn't respected by anyone at our club.
No, but that's
not the people that hired him, nor the players.
But look, obviously, the moment I think it was an article that said, "Oh, I don't like the fact that we're running," or something like that. Like, as soon as that comes out, it's just like, wait, what? Who's got the power here? You know, he was running a losing battle. To be fair, he was fighting a losing battle. So,
and that was the same with the Ronaldo interview. People didn't have a clue what Ralph was doing, so the players didn't know, and no one knew. Like, for instance, what or the backroom staff was doing. How would the fans know what's going on?
Yeah, exactly that, and that's it, man. And it's one of them ones, and I think was it Reese that's popped it in the chat here. Whenever I think of Ralph and the players that he wanted Man United to go and get, it's crazy how they didn't even try and back him.
Bro, they didn't listen to a single recommendation he made, and the amount of players that he recommended our club.
Yeah. Enzo Fernandez is another one.
Yeah. Alvarez, all of that December, we were linked to Alvarez. Come the January transfer window, City swoop in. 14 million they paid for him.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. We'll finish off with 2 more questions from Rather. Question, is it right for a manager to go back to the same club like Jose at Chelsea? Would you take back Emery then at Arsenal, Tereak? Would you take back Roy Hodgson, Rich? Would you take back Ollie Brush?
Hell to the no. Not as manager. I'd love to see him though.
Yeah.
And relive the good old days.
Do you know what, guys? Ladies and gents, relationships and club football managers, they're very the same. You never go back to an ex, and once the trust is gone, you can't rebuild it.
There
Those are the
are
key things.
situations where it does work, though. Look at Carlo Ancelotti in Real Madrid.
Yeah.
I think Fabio Capello as well had different
The
stints at
downward
AC
Real
Milan.
Madrid.
So yeah, there are instances where it can work.
Yeah, anomalies, because if you look at Allegri,
And this is why I think for Everton, they should go and just get David Moyes back. He's not doing a great job at West Ham at the moment.
Yeah, to be honest, Rich, I thought, that was the second name that came to mind. Actually, it's a shame Matt's gone.
To be fair, he went back and it was quite successful. So I'm just defeating my point there.
Yeah. Initially, I was thinking, I was like, yeah, the position they're in now, this calls for a big Sam, or if Moyes gets sacked, then that might be a move. Like, because he looked quite depressed to have beaten Everton last week.
I like Coffee said Sir Alex Ferguson back to Man United, Wenger back to Arsenal.
No, but it didn't end great for Wenger, so
No.
It was nice to have him back in the stadium for that West Ham game.
I'll tell you what, over the years, every time I used to see Fergie just sitting there alongside David Gill, I used to get mad. I was like, why don't you just manage? You're bloody there anyway.
But in all fairness, though, when we're talking about the in tandem part with David, if I wonder what Sir Alex would have done without a David Gill.
Yeah, no, listen, in the last couple of years of his tenure as well, like you could tell, like he was fighting a losing battle, man. One arm tied behind his back, and that. When we look back on it now, and even the statements he put out, like there's no value in the market and all that nonsense. Obviously, that's coming from the board, innit? And you'll understand that, T, because I think Wenger did the same, where he deflected a lot from the board and took on a lot of criticism himself. But whereas actually it was the higher ups that were at fault.
Exactly. And there's no coincidence. It went downhill as soon as Wenger lost David Dean. It's not a coincidence.
Yeah. And then if you look at Fergie's last couple of years, like he was definitely, papering over cracks.
Mm-hmm.
Like even the Van Persie deal, right, for that last league title, like that was papering over the cracks. At the time, I was actually quite annoyed not because I questioned his talent, because obviously fantastic player, just the short-sightedness of it all. And if you look at the overall age of that squad as well, from our defense to everything else, I just thought, this isn't really a proper rebuild, is it? And it wasn't. It was just enough to see him through.
I agree. And David Moyes, he was just in that losing battle, wasn't he? As an inexperienced manager coming into what people thought what previously was a title-winning team to a very aging team. And I think it was... And he only got backed for one player in the summer.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was crazy. Because again, like when you look at his CV, like what qualified him for that job at that time?
Exactly. That's just the problem. And getting back to the last question from Ravi, which I think is a good one, which I think it's different compared to which club it's at. Does a club legend make a good manager at their boyhood club?
I don't think the best players make the best managers. I think this is a popular misconception as well, yeah.
But I think there's more excitement in it because they think, they love the club, they want to do well for the club.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then that turns sour when things don't go well, because then, like Ollie, they're like, but he won us the Champions League.
But now they don't even consider him as a player legend now.
It's things like that. Like Lampard back at Chelsea. First season did really well when he had no money. Got money and did a terrible job.
See, this no money thing though, Rich, we say that, but you look at the amount of players they loaned out.
A lack of money. Let's just say that.
And they were proactive. They were proactive as well. They saw that embargo come in and they signed Christian Pulisic in the January window. So I think we overemphasize this no money thing.
Yeah, and that's why I feel personally with Gerrard.
It's one of those. It touches on the heartstrings of fans, doesn't it? Obviously, you love to see your legends come and do that, and because I remember when Roy Keane retired, I was like, I'd love it, especially early on in his managerial career when he was at Sunderland. I was like, I'd love it if one day if Roy was back in our dugout, but it doesn't always go that way.
But for certain, but there are anomalies and exceptions to the rule where Ajax, they are excellent at it because they've got a deep rooted philosophy.
But they have a proper system in place. Yeah. They're not just hiring them based on your previous accolades as a player. Like they train you up on that.
But that's what, exactly. It's not really based off your accolades. They build
you. Like
whilst you're
Edwin
there.
van der Sar, right? They sent him back to university. He got his masters. They spent 10 years making him into the CEO he's become.
I think Bayern Munich was quite similar as well.
Yeah, Munich are set up very similar like that.
Yeah. So if you are built in a club like that, if you are built for sustainability, and you can generate good managers, if you just build them up and give them the right pathway.
Yeah. So it's nice, but yeah, that's not the be all and end all for me. Ultimately, you need to have the right qualifications and be the right person for the job. On top of that, if you have a history with the club, then it's a bonus. But that's it.
I do think it is important to hire within as well, though, within the club, because that's how you maintain culture. Like especially from certain aspects, like Johan Cruyff. The reason that's why Ajax are why they are what they are, because Cruyff was given that opportunity to build that within them, and that's why Barcelona are successful. Because before Cruyff, they weren't that good. Barcelona.
You say that, T, and this is why, for me personally, like that Lampard getting the job from Derby, they were better off giving it to Jody Morris. Because he did an amazing job with the youth teams and stuff, and he's embedded in that culture. And maybe even if he went as manager and Lampard went to take the youth that Jody Morris was doing, then Lampard could slowly filter through, learning the culture, learning the way, and then take the Chelsea job. But just because of his name.
And that's identity. That's so important, because that's what you'll always remember, that you're remembered for. And I know it's a hot topic with Arsenal fans, because he had that in the changing room at the Spurs game, and it's what Eddie Howe keeps preaching. Our identity is intensity at Newcastle. If you can maintain that and you can build that out of a club, then you'll be good forever. But if you lose that identity, which Arsenal did, Chelsea have done, Man United did, you're sleeping giant.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that, and we'll get it wrapped up from here. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Tereak, and thank you, Brush, and also Matt, who left a little bit earlier on, for all coming in, doing this show. It's been a fantastic show. Rich, would you like to shout out your socials?
Maisy, thank you so much for inviting me on. This was a really, really good topic of conversation. And such. I do like these kind of breakaway chats where it's not just about your team specifically. It's nice to hear from different fans about topics that affect the game that we love. But yes, you can find me on Eagle Eyed Football on YouTube. The Twitter handle is there, Eagle Eyed Ball, because I don't have enough characters. But yeah, just type Eagle Eyed Football wherever you go. You should be able to find us.
Thank you as well, Tereak, for coming on. Would you like to shout out your socials also?
Yeah, just to touch on and add on what Rich said, brilliant show, Maisy. Thank you for inviting me on. And it's good to have different fans from, different, backgrounds and stuff and situations as well. Having Matt here earlier, Brush and Rich, as always, my brothers. So yeah, thank you for inviting me. And you can find me at Tereak Talks. There you go, first time. It's always hard and doing it on YouTube, but yeah, Tereak Talks on socials, on YouTube, and on Twitter as well, where I'll be doing a watch along for the Man City game tomorrow. So if you want to watch Arsenal against see my reactions and my pain, and maybe then yeah, tune in there.
And thank you, Brush, for coming on also. Would you like to shout out your socials?
Always a pleasure, mate. Thank you for having me on. You can find me on Twitter at Brushy87. Outside of that, I'll just be floating about in the community, popping up on the odd stream here and there and in comments.
Thank you, all of you, and I've put your link in the description for all your channels and your Twitter handles as well. So if you haven't already, go and subscribe to Rich and Tereak. And Matt also does a show on the Weekly Armchair, so I've put the Weekly Armchairs link on there also, as well as Matt's Twitter handle. So go and check everybody out. All great people. We're all one community. All support one another, which I absolutely love. And only a year ago I met these guys. So
Maze, could we quickly just highlight Reese's message, please?
Which one was this?
The rotary.
The one where Tereak needs to stop smiling.
He's a smiley guy, Tereak. He just brings a load of positive energy. It gives me a nice bounce when I go on a stream.
I love that. Yeah,
Yeah, he does. He's been smirking a bit too much though for my liking.
I'm on a Man United channel. Our last game we just beat you, so I'm happy. When I first met you, Mace, that's when it was before we lost to you, in fact.
Yeah, and then I bantered you.
Exactly.
But
so that's what we need to do. We need to get you two on a stream before we play each other.
Yeah, it's true. Actually, is that my diary? Oh.
Well, Tereak will maybe hiding from me before then.
I know. I'll be hiding behind a Premier League trophy, hopefully.
Hopefully you don't spray paint it this time.
Can I just say this, Maisy? Listen, like after the last couple of months you've had as well, like, listen, you just keep doing what you're doing, man. Excellent content. So supportive of everyone else as well. And you had unfortunate idiots coming on here under A-listers trying to discredit you. So listen, you keep rocking, girl. Like, you're doing amazing.
Thank you very much for the lovely words.
Yeah, you got a brilliant community here as well, Mace. Yeah, definitely.
The community is quality.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you all for all your support, and everyone in the chat, do the same. Support these guys. Support them. I'll be back next week. I've got a women's preview. Manchester United are taking on Everton. So hopefully another win. I think Matt might have dodged that for the bit at the end, but that's going to be on Monday, 7:15. Andy and Chloe as always. So go and check that out, and we'll take care. Have a nice weekend. Bye bye.